The Invisible Architect, a review of Robert Walker's The Silent Khagan. History remembers Kublai Khan, the Great Khan, builder of Xanadu, conqueror of the Song Dynasty, founder of the Yuan. Robert Walker's The Silent Khagan asks a different question: who actually built it? The answer in Walker's telling is a woman whose name most readers have never encountered, Empress Chabi, a Khongirad noblewoman who never commanded an army, never delivered a speech, never signed a decree, and yet engineered the largest contiguous empire in human history from behind a felt screen. This is a novel about the architecture of invisible power, and the woman who understood that the most dangerous kind of authority is the kind no one can see. She was not good, she was not evil, she was powerful, and power has no morality, only consequences. That line is the spine of the novel. Walker refuses to simplify Chabi into either a feminist hero or a scheming villainess. She is something more unsettling than either. A woman who understood power with the clarity of an engineer reading a blueprint and who applied it without sentiment. History remembers Kublai Khan, but Walker's narrative reveals that the Yuan dynasty, the Mongol empire that swallowed China whole, was engineered by the woman beside the throne, not with cavalry charges and siege warfare, but through the mastery of information, economics, and a ruthlessness that never needed to raise its voice. The Khongirad were not warriors. They were the clan that married their daughters to conquerors, and then governed through the conqueror's blind spots. Chabi learned this lesson young, and Walker renders it through the metaphor of the bronze mirror. The world in a mirror is the world as it is not. Chabi's foundational insight was that men of power need to see what they expect to see: loyalty, submission, deference, and that a woman who could project that reflection while quietly reversing the image could shape decisions from the shadows without ever appearing to make them. Power is not taken, Walker tells us through Chabi. It is directed, like light through a polished surface, entering as one thing, exiting as another, and the man holding the mirror never notices the reversal. Chabi was mentored by Sorghaghtani Beki, the widow who ruled without armies, the woman who had already proven that the Mongol Empire's future belonged not to the men who conquered territory, but to the ones who could administer it. From her, Chabi absorbed a lesson that drives the entire novel. Empires cannot be held by horses alone. They are sustained by compound interest, grain taxes, and debt. A man who reads can govern an empire from a single tent. Walker makes this the pivot point of Chabi's character. She does not reject Mongol military power. She redefines what conquest means. The battlefield wins the province. The ledger keeps it. And the woman who controls the ledger controls the empire, regardless of whose name is on the seal. Chabi's genius, as Walker renders it, was her refusal to choose between cultures. Every other Mongol ruler faced the same impossible question: do we become Chinese or do we remain Mongol? Chabi's answer was neither. She built the Marble Hall, the formal Chinese court, to secure public legitimacy. She maintained the Cane Palace, the traditional Mongol Gur compound, for private decision-making. A universal emperor rules the contradiction. The public face speaks Chinese, the private hand moves in Mongol. And the woman who designed both spaces understood that the architecture itself was the argument, that legitimacy is not a fact but a performance, staged in the right building for the right audience at the right time. When Kublai's brother Arik Bokeh makes his move for the throne at Karakorum, the succession crisis threatens to shatter the empire. Chabi does not send an army. She sends a single horse trainer named Boroldai, carrying 12 memorized words, a warning to Kublai that arrives faster than any cavalry dispatch. Generals command armies, empresses command information. Walker builds this scene into one of the novel's most electric set pieces. The entire fate of the Mongol Empire turns not on a battle, but on a woman's intelligence network, a web of informants, horse trainers, merchants, and Buddhist monks that stretches across the continent. While the generals argue about formations, Chabi has already won by knowing what they don't. That information travels faster than horses, and the person who controls the message controls the war before it starts. Chabi defeats the conservative Mongol rebellion not with a single decisive battle, but with the most devastating weapon in her arsenal: patience. She blockades the 4 trade corridors that feed the steppe. She cuts off grain, salt, iron, and silk, and then she waits. Walker renders the arithmetic of this strategy in devastating detail. Year 1, defiance. Year 2, rationing. Year 3, desperation. Year 4, collapse. The slow, deliberate starvation of a rebellion that believed tradition would sustain it, and learned too late that tradition does not feed armies. Grain does. It is a victory that never appears in any chronicle as a battle. There are no heroes, no charges, no banners. There is only a woman watching supply lines on a map and a population curve that bends towards zero. Every empire needs revenue. Walker does not flinch from what that means in practice. To fund the dynasty's infrastructure, the canals, the roads, the postal system, the cultural projects that would legitimize Mongol rule over 100 million Chinese subjects, Chabi protects Ahmad Fanakati. He is a brilliant, utterly corrupt finance minister who extracts maximum wealth from the conquered population through monopolies, currency manipulation, and systematic extortion. He delivers a 340% revenue increase without raising the land tax, a financial miracle paid for in human suffering that never appears on the balance sheet. Chabi knows what Ahmad is. She protects him anyway, because the dynasty needs the money, and the Khan needs to remain untouched by the moral fallout. Walker gives us no easy moral position here. He simply opens the ledger and lets us read. Chabi commissions a Tibetan monk named Drogon Chogyal Phagpa to create a 41-character universal alphabet, a script capable of transcribing Mongol, Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, and Persian in a single system. It is, on its surface, a bureaucratic tool, a standardization project. Walker sees it for what it actually is, a weapon of cultural absorption disguised as administrative efficiency. The script is deliberately stripped of beauty, no calligraphic flourishes, no artistic pretension, because beauty would mark it as belonging to one culture. Its ugliness is its universality, and embedded within its structure, invisible to anyone who isn't looking, is the phonetic DNA of Tibetan Buddhist scripture, the Dharma encoded into the everyday paperwork of empire. Chabi builds a writing system that secretly teaches Buddhism to every clerk who uses it. The bureaucracy becomes the monastery. The tax form becomes the sutra. When Linan falls and the Song Dynasty collapses, Chabi makes what Walker presents as her single most calculated move. She treats the defeated Song Empress Dowager with profound grace, a formal reception, dignified quarters, the preservation of imperial honors. It is not kindness, it is stagecraft. Chabi understands that the Chinese historians who will write the record of this moment must document a peaceful succession, not a barbarian destruction. If the Empress Dowager is humiliated, the narrative becomes conquest. If she is honored, the narrative becomes transition. And the narrative, Chabi knows, is the only thing that will survive long enough to matter. The Celadon bowl, the most refined object in Chinese civilization, now carries Mongol fingerprints. But it is unbroken, and that is the point. Chabi raises her son Zhenjin, whose name means true gold, to be the perfect hybrid ruler. He studies Confucian classics with Chinese tutors. He rides with Mongol warriors. He is groomed to inherit an empire that requires both identities simultaneously. But Walker turns this into the novel's deepest tragedy. Zhenjin absorbs the Confucian morality too well. He develops a genuine ethical conscience, and that conscience cannot survive contact with the corrupt, ruthless realities of his parents' administration. The boy she built to bridge two worlds is torn apart by the contradiction between them. His strict moral code clashes violently with the empire that Ahmad Fanakati's extortion funds and his mother's strategic ruthlessness sustains. Chabi creates her masterpiece, and her masterpiece breaks. Built by Nepali architects, engineered by the Chinese, and funded by Mongol wealth, the White Stupa of Khanbalik represents Chabi's ultimate philosophical position. The dynasty builds toward permanence. Every canal, every road, every legal code, every alphabet is designed to last. And yet, the monument Chabi commissions at the center of her capital points toward the void. It is a Buddhist structure, and Buddhism teaches that all structures are temporary. All empires are temporary. All power is temporary. Walker renders this as Chabi's private confession, hidden in plain sight at the heart of the empire she built. She knows. She has always known. The architecture will outlast the architects. The emptiness will outlast the architecture. In 1281, the bowstring snaps. Chabi dies, and the empire she held together through invisible force begins its slow, inevitable unraveling. Walker does not dramatize her death with spectacle. He dramatizes the absence, the decisions that no longer get made, the contradictions that no longer get managed, the balancing act that no longer has a performer. Without her invisible hand, the system falters. Kublai succumbs to grief, gout, and inaction. The generals quarrel, the administrators steal, the provinces drift. The empire that looked from the outside like the achievement of a great Khan is revealed to have been, all along, the achievement of the woman he could not function without. Following Chabi's death, Ahmad Fanakati, the finance minister she protected for decades, is assassinated. His iron strongbox is opened, and what emerges is not just the record of massive financial theft, but evidence of horrific personal crimes that Chabi's protection had kept hidden. The delicate balance she maintained between necessary corruption and imperial progress shatters entirely. Walker forces the reader to confront the full cost of Chabi's pragmatism. The dynasty's achievements were funded by a monster, and the woman who built the dynasty knew it and chose to look the other way. Not out of ignorance, but out of calculation. There is no redemption in this scene. There is only the ledger, finally opened, and the reader left to decide what the balance shows. Walker's masterful narrative reminds us that the loudest figures in history rarely do the building. Chabi left no speeches and commanded no armies, yet her invisible architecture shaped a century of world history. The postal roads she systematized became the arteries of global trade. The legal codes she influenced became the template for multicultural governance. The capital she helped design, Khanbalik, became Beijing. The empire she engineered from behind a felt screen became the foundation upon which modern China was built. She is the invisible architect, and the building is still standing. A brilliant study in the ruthless, silent mechanics of power.